The private dining room at Aurelius occupies the entire 47th floor of Manhattan's Obsidian Tower, a cathedral of glass and brushed steel where the city spreads beneath like a circuit board of light. Tonight, the room has been reserved for what the reservation simply calls the Sterling Acquisition. $300 million will change hands before dessert is served. The crystal chandeliers have been dimmed to a warm amber. The Château Margaux, 1995, breathes in Riedel decanters. The table settings alone cost more than most Americans earn in a year. Elena Vasquez moves through this world like a ghost. She is 27 years old. Her uniform, crisp white shirt, black vest, black slacks, renders her invisible to the titans who will soon fill this room. The sommelier's pin on her lapel marks her as staff, furniture, something to be looked past, never at. She adjusts the placement of a butter knife by precisely 2 millimeters, ensuring the setting is mathematically perfect, because that is what is expected, and because her mind cannot tolerate disorder even when her heart is breaking. 3 years ago, Elena defended her doctoral dissertation at MIT. Her thesis, Predictive Algorithmic Modeling in Corporate Acquisition Fraud Detection, received the Kleiner Prize for Excellence in Financial Mathematics. Her advisor, Professor Hiroshi Tanaka, called it the most elegant synthesis of behavioral economics and computational analysis I have seen in 30 years of teaching. The Wall Street Journal profiled her as one of 20 under 30 reshaping finance. Goldman Sachs offered her a position starting at $400,000 annually, plus bonus. She never took that job. 16 days before her start date, her mother collapsed in the kitchen of their small apartment in Queens, stage 4, pancreatic cancer. The diagnosis came with a prognosis, 6 months, possibly 8 with aggressive treatment. The treatment cost more than Elena's father, a carpenter who had built his own furniture shop from nothing, had earned in his entire life. Insurance covered a fraction. The shop was sold. The house was sold. Her father worked 3 jobs until his heart gave out 7 months into her mother's battle. Elena buried both parents within 4 months of each other. The medical debt exceeded $600,000. The collection agencies began calling before the headstones were placed. Goldman Sachs rescinded the offer. They needed someone who could start immediately, not someone disappearing for weeks at a time. Her academic references went stale while she negotiated payment plans and sold everything that remained of her childhood. Now she pours wine for men who would not notice if she spontaneously combusted in front of them. The debt is down to $342,000. At her current rate of payment, 60% of her income from this job, plus tips, plus weekend tutoring, plus the overnight proofreading work she does for a legal firm, she will be debt-free in approximately 11 years. She will be 38. Her prime earning years will be behind her. Her academic credentials will have fossilized. The career she spent a decade building will have become a historical curiosity, a what might have been story her future students will never hear. She does not allow herself to think about this often. Tonight, she thinks about it constantly. Because tonight's acquisition involves Meridian Dynamics, the company whose stock manipulation her dissertation had flagged as statistically anomalous. The company whose CFO she had identified, in an unpublished addendum to her thesis, as exhibiting signature indicators of systematic earnings fabrication. The company that her algorithm had predicted, with 93% confidence, would experience a significant fraud revelation within 3 to 5 years of her analysis. That was 4 years ago. No one had listened. No one had cared what a graduate student thought about a $15 billion technology company. Her emails to the SEC were never answered. Her attempts to contact financial journalists were politely rebuffed. She was nobody. She knew nothing. She was too young, too inexperienced, too female, too brown to be taken seriously by men who moved markets with their breakfast conversations. Elena straightens the last fork and steps back to survey her work. The table is immaculate. The room is ready. She catches her reflection in the floor-to-ceiling windows. A slender figure in black and white, dark hair pulled back severely, eyes that have seen too much loss to ever look young again. She is invisible. She is brilliant. She is drowning. And tonight, the men who destroyed her career before it began will sit at her table and never know she exists. They arrive in waves of Italian wool and Swiss watches, trailing assistants and confidence like vapor trails behind jets. Elena stands by the service entrance, invisible, cataloging them with the clinical precision her training demands. First through the door, Harrison Webb, CEO of Nexus Capital Partners, 63 years old, net worth $4.2 billion. His fund has executed 17 major acquisitions in the past decade, including 3 that subsequently revealed accounting irregularities. He made Forbes' list of most admired CEOs for 6 consecutive years. His first wife received a settlement that required its own legal team to manage. His second wife is younger than his daughter. He walks like a man who has never been told no. Behind him, Martin Ashworth, Nexus Capital's Chief Investment Officer. 51, Oxford educated, with the particular brand of British arrogance that assumes competence is a birthright of proper breeding. His due diligence teams have missed, or ignored, warning signs in 4 separate acquisitions that later resulted in shareholder lawsuits. He has never been held personally accountable for any of them. Then the Meridian contingent. Victor Chen, founder and CEO, enters with the carefully constructed casualness of a man who owns 3 private islands, but wants you to believe he still takes the subway. His company revolutionized cloud computing infrastructure. His personal foundation funds education initiatives in developing nations. His social media presence is carefully curated to project thoughtful leadership. Elena knows, because she spent 3 years studying his company's financial statements, that the foundation is primarily a tax shelter and the subway rides are scheduled photo opportunities. Beside Chen, Marcus Webb, no relation to Harrison, the CFO whose financial engineering Elena's algorithm had dissected like a frog in a biology class. He is the one who built the structures, the nested subsidiaries, the revenue recognition schemes, the circular transactions that inflate numbers just enough to maintain Wall Street's confidence without triggering obvious red flags. He is very, very good at his job. Elena had spent 18 months proving that his job was, at its core, fraud. The final arrival makes Elena's hands tremble slightly as she reaches for the water pitcher. James Whitfield, 71 years old, chairman of the Whitfield Family Trust. Net worth, $11 billion, inherited across 4 generations of industrial wealth, compounded by strategic marriages and ruthless investment. He is here because the Sterling acquisition will be funded in part by his trust, and he has insisted, as he always insists, on meeting the principles before committing his capital. James Whitfield is different from the others. Elena has researched him too, not for fraud, but because his trust funded the fellowship that paid for her second year at MIT. He is a genuine philanthropist, not a tax shelter philanthropist. His donations to education have changed thousands of lives. His business reputation is built on integrity, not image management. He is, by all accounts, a decent man in an indecent industry. If he commits his capital to this acquisition, he will lose everything. Elena watches them take their seats, watches the power dynamics establish themselves through body language and seating choices. Harrison Webb claims the head of the table. Nexus is leading the acquisition. Victor Chen sits at his right hand, the seller being courted. James Whitfield takes a position at the far end, observing rather than participating, his pale blue eyes missing nothing. The head sommelier, Francois, gives Elena the signal. She begins pouring water, moving counterclockwise around the table, her movements practiced and invisible. The men are already deep in conversation, speaking over her head as though she were part of the furniture. Harrison Webb. The due diligence is complete. Martin's team has been over every number twice. The fundamentals are solid. Martin Ashworth. Better than solid. Meridian's cloud infrastructure contracts are locked in for the next 7 years. The revenue projections are conservative, if anything. Elena's hand does not shake as she fills Marcus Webb's glass. She is close enough to smell his cologne. Something expensive, something designed to project success. She is close enough to see the folder open in front of him, the summary page visible. Her eyes flicker across the numbers. Just a glance. Just a fraction of a second. But that fraction is enough. The revenue recognition methodology has changed since her dissertation. He has gotten more sophisticated. But the underlying pattern is the same. She can see it in the quarterly progression, in the suspicious smoothness of the growth curve, in the way certain numbers repeat at intervals that are statistically improbable in organic business operations. Harrison Webb, noticing Elena's pause. Is there a problem with the water? Elena realizes she has stopped moving. Every eye at the table has turned toward her. For the first time in 3 years, someone has noticed she exists. Elena, recovering smoothly. Apologies, sir. I thought I saw a water spot on the glass. May I replace it? Harrison Webb, dismissive wave. Fine. Just be quick about it. Elena retreats to the service station. Her heart is pounding. Her mind is racing through calculations she hasn't performed in years, numbers clicking into place like tumblers in a lock. The pattern is there. It has always been there. And tonight, $300 million, including money from the one benefactor who unknowingly helped her survive, is about to disappear into a corporate shell game that will take years to unravel. She could say nothing. She could pour the wine, clear the plates, collect her tips, and go home to her cramped studio apartment. The debt would remain. The years would pass. The money would disappear. James Whitfield would lose his investment. Harrison Webb would profit from the wreckage. Victor Chen and Marcus Webb would walk away wealthy, their schemes intact. She could be invisible, or she could remember who she is. The evening proceeds through its choreographed courses. Amuse-bouche, a delicate sphere of compressed watermelon and feta, designed to cleanse and prepare the palate. First course, seared diver scallops with cauliflower puree and black truffle. The conversation flows around discussions of market positioning and synergy capture, the language of acquisition obscuring the raw mathematics of extraction. Elena serves. She pours. She removes plates and replaces them with silent efficiency. And she listens. Her training, the 1,000 hours of financial analysis, the machine learning models she built from scratch, the statistical framework she developed to detect anomalies invisible to human eyes, activates like dormant software receiving a startup command. Every number mentioned is logged. Every claim is cross-referenced against the data she glimpsed in Marcus Webb's folder. Every statement is tested against the behavioral patterns she documented in her dissertation. Marcus Webb, CFO. Our infrastructure division alone generated $412 million in recurring revenue last quarter. That's a 17% year-over-year increase. 17%, Elena notes. The same growth rate they claimed in Q2 of the year she wrote her dissertation, and Q4 of the year before that, and Q3 of the year before that. The probability of maintaining exactly 17% growth across 6 quarters in a volatile technology market is less than 1%. The probability of it happening organically is functionally 0. Victor Chen. The Sentinel contract alone is worth $80 million annually. Pentagon-grade security infrastructure, 7-year commitment with automatic renewal clauses. Elena refills James Whitfield's wine glass. The elderly billionaire is watching the presentation with sharp eyes, his expression neutral but attentive. He asks few questions, but the questions he asks are precise. James Whitfield. The Sentinel contract, that's the Department of Defense Cloud Migration Project, correct? The one announced last March? Victor Chen. Precisely. Meridian was selected over 14 competing bids. Our security protocols exceeded every requirement by a factor of 3. Elena's hand pauses on the wine bottle. The Sentinel contract. She remembers reading about that announcement. She also remembers reading, in a buried footnote in Meridian's subsequent quarterly filing, that the contract was subject to ongoing implementation review. The footnote disappeared from the next quarter's filing entirely. She moves to the service station under pretense of retrieving bread. Her phone is in her pocket. Staff are not supposed to carry them, but she keeps hers for emergencies. With practiced discretion, she pulls up the Federal Procurement Database. Her fingers move quickly across the screen. There it is. Contract DF Cloud 7741 Sentinel. Awarded to Meridian Dynamics, March 15th. Modified August 8th. Modified again, November 2nd. The modification codes tell the story. Scope reduction, timeline extension, penalty assessment. The $80 million contract has been reduced to $31 million, with delivery milestones pushed back 18 months. Victor Chen just told a table full of investors that the contract is worth $80 million annually. The actual contracted value is now less than 40% of that figure, spread over a longer timeline. This is not an interpretation issue. This is not an accounting methodology dispute. This is a lie. Elena returns to the table with the bread basket. Her movements are steady, but her mind is racing through the implications. If the Sentinel contract has been this significantly modified, what else in the due diligence package is fabricated? The 17% growth rate, the revenue projections, the contract pipeline that Martin Ashworth's team supposedly verified twice. She thinks of her dissertation. She thinks of the 18 months she spent building models to detect exactly this kind of fraud. She thinks of the emails she sent to the SEC that were never answered, the journalists who never called back, the academic advisors who told her to stay in her lane and not make accusations she couldn't prove. She can prove this. The main course arrives, dry-aged Wagyu beef with bone marrow butter and a red wine reduction. Elena serves each plate with mechanical precision, her body performing the familiar rituals while her mind constructs arguments, marshals evidence, calculates probabilities of success versus catastrophic career damage. Career. The word almost makes her laugh. What career? She is a server. She is invisible. The career she spent a decade building exists only in old academic databases and a dissertation gathering dust in MIT's library. Unless tonight changes that. Harrison Webb to James Whitfield. I understand your caution, James. 300 million is significant, even for you, but the fundamentals here are ironclad. Martin's team has been thorough. James Whitfield. Thorough enough to verify the contract modifications on the Sentinel project? The table goes silent. Elena, clearing the bread plates, freezes. James Whitfield has asked the one question Victor Chen cannot answer, honestly. The old man's eyes are fixed on the Meridian CEO with an intensity that suggests he already suspects the answer. Victor Chen, carefully. There have been some implementation adjustments, standard for government contracts of this complexity. The core value proposition remains intact. Marcus Webb, CFO. The modifications are reflected in our forward guidance. The impact is minimal, less than 8% of projected revenue. Less than 8%. Elena does the math instantly. If the Sentinel contract was reduced from 80 million to 31 million, that's a 61% reduction, not 8%. They are either calculating against a different baseline, which would itself be misleading, or they are lying directly to James Whitfield's face. She watches the old billionaire consider the answer. He is not satisfied. She can see it in the slight narrowing of his eyes. But he is also not confrontational by nature. He has built his fortune through careful analysis and patience, not aggressive challenges. He will ask his own team to verify later. He will discover the truth eventually. But by then, the acquisition will be closed. The money will be committed. The fraud will be institutionalized into Nexus Capital's portfolio, where it will compound and metastasize until the inevitable collapse takes down not just the original investors, but everyone connected to the wreckage. Elena finishes clearing the bread plates. She has perhaps 20 minutes before dessert service begins. 20 minutes to decide whether she remains invisible or becomes visible in a way that cannot be undone. She looks at James Whitfield, at the man whose fellowship helped her survive her second year at MIT, who has no idea she exists, who is about to lose $100 million to men who view him as nothing more than a source of capital to be extracted. She thinks of her mother, who worked 18-hour days cleaning houses so Elena could study calculus instead of taking shifts. She thinks of her father, who mortgaged everything to pay for her education, who died believing his sacrifice had been worth it. She makes her decision. Dessert has been served. A delicate construction of dark chocolate mousse with gold leaf and candied violets. The conversation has turned to timeline. Harrison Webb wants to close within 30 days, before the quarter ends, before market conditions shift, before anyone asks too many questions. Harrison Webb. James, I need your commitment tonight. The seller has other interested parties. We move now, or we lose the opportunity. James Whitfield. Measured. I want to review the contract documentation one more time. The modifications concern me. Marcus Webb, CFO. Mr. Whitfield, I assure you, the modifications are standard government contracting procedures. The core revenue is unaffected. Our projections account for every variable. Elena steps forward from the service station. She is carrying a coffee carafe, the standard prop of invisibility. But she does not pour. She stops at the edge of the table, in the space between Harrison Webb and James Whitfield, and she speaks. Elena, forgive me, but that's not accurate. The silence that follows is absolute. Every head at the table turns toward her. Harrison Webb's face cycles through confusion, irritation, and outrage in the space of 2 seconds. Harrison Webb. Excuse me? Elena. The Sentinel contract modification. It's not 8% of projected revenue. The contract was reduced from $80 million to $31 million. That's a 61% reduction in contracted value. Marcus Webb, CFO, standing, face reddening. This is absurd. Who is this person? I want her removed immediately. Harrison Webb, to Francois, who has appeared at the service entrance. Get this woman out of here. Now. James Whitfield, quietly, raising his hand. Wait. The word is soft, but it carries the weight of $11 billion. Francois stops moving. Harrison Webb's mouth closes. Every eye in the room shifts to the elderly billionaire, who is studying Elena with sudden, intense curiosity. James Whitfield, to Elena. How do you know the specific contract values? Elena, for one Sentinel. All modifications to federal contracts are public record. Martin Ashworth, scoffing. A waitress reading federal procurement databases? Harrison, this is some kind of prank. Someone put her up to this. Elena, turning to face Ashworth directly. The database is accessible to anyone. So is Meridian's SEC filing from last quarter. The Sentinel. Contract is listed in the Material Agreements section, with a footnote referencing ongoing modifications. The footnote does not disclose the modification scope. That omission is material misrepresentation under Section 10B of the Securities Exchange Act. Ashworth's face drains of color. He glances at Marcus Webb, who has gone very still. Victor Chen, forced calm. Young lady, I don't know who you are or what you think you know, but our legal and compliance teams have reviewed every filing. Everything is in order. Elena. Then perhaps they should review your quarterly revenue recognition patterns. 17% growth for 6 consecutive quarters, in a sector with average variance of plus or minus 12%. The probability of that occurring organically is less than 1%. Harrison Webb, exploding. This is insane. You're a waitress. You pour water and bring bread. How dare you? Elena, cutting him off, voice steady. I have a doctorate in financial mathematics from MIT. My dissertation, which won the Kleiner Prize, Mr. Webb, was titled Predictive Algorithmic Modeling in Corporate Acquisition Fraud Detection. One of the case studies I analyzed was meridian dynamics. I identified the same revenue manipulation patterns 4 years ago that are present in the documents on this table tonight. The room has gone completely silent. Harrison Webb's mouth is open, but no sound emerges. Victor Chen has gone gray. Marcus Webb's hands are visibly shaking. James Whitfield, leaning forward. The Kleiner Prize. I endow that award. Elena, I know. The Whitfield Fellowship paid for my 2nd year of graduate study. Your foundation is the reason I was able to complete my doctorate. Something shifts in James Whitfield's expression. Recognition, perhaps, or the dawning awareness that the universe has arranged a coincidence too perfect to be coincidence. James Whitfield. And you're serving wine in a restaurant because, Elena, because my parents died within 4 months of each other, and the medical debt exceeded $600,000. Because I missed my start date at Goldman Sachs. Because by the time I buried my father, my academic references were stale, and no one returns call dismissed her, who looked through her, who would have watched James Whitfield lose $100 million without blinking. Elena. But I didn't forget what I learned, and I didn't stop watching the companies I flagged in my research. Meridian's revenue patterns haven't changed since 2019. The same statistical anomalies, the same suspicious consistency, the same nested subsidiary structures designed to obscure cash flow timing. She picks up Marcus Webb's folder, the one he left open on the table, and flips to a page near the back. Elena, this is your revenue bridge. Analysis. You're showing organic growth of 12% with an additional 5% from new contracts. But if I cross-reference against your accounts receivable aging report, which you conveniently didn't include in the acquisition package, I would expect to find that a significant portion of this revenue hasn't actually been collected, because it can't be collected, because the contracts supporting it have either been modified, delayed, or exist only as letters of intent that will never convert to binding agreements. Marcus Webb, CFO. Voice cracking. You can't. That's proprietary information? Elena. I didn't need your proprietary information, Mr. Webb. I just needed pattern recognition. Your methodology hasn't changed since I analyzed it in graduate school. You're still using the same circular transaction structures between your Delaware subsidiaries. You're still recognizing that justifies acquisitions at premiums you know the underlying business can't support. She sets the folder down and looks directly at Victor Chen. Elena. This acquisition isn't about synergy or strategic value. It's about getting liquid before the house of cards collapses. You need Nexus Capital to absorb Meridian, so the inevitable restatement becomes their problem instead of yours. You need Mr. Whitfield money to close the deal before anyone conducts real due diligence. You've done this before. You'll do it again, unless someone stops you. She steps back from the table. Her hands are steady. Her voice has not wavered. 4 years of silence, of invisibility, of being dismissed and overlooked and forgotten. All of it culminating in this moment, in this room, in front of men who never imagined she existed. Elena, my dissertation is in MIT's library. My algorithm is published. Every claim I've made tonight is verifiable. If Mr. Whitfield, or anyone else at this table, wants to proceed with this acquisition after hearing what I've said, that's their choice. But they will not be able to claim they weren't warned. The room fractures. James Whitfield is already on his phone, speaking in low, urgent tones to someone. His legal team, perhaps, or his due diligence consultants. Harrison Webb has turned on Victor Chen with the cold fury. You told me Martin's team had verified everything. You gave me personal assurances. Victor Chen, desperately. Harrison, this is a misunderstanding. The girl, she doesn't know what she's talking about. She's a waitress. She pours water. She doesn't understand the complexity of enterprise revenue recognition. Martin Ashworth, to Harrison Webb, face ashen. We should have caught the contract modification. The procurement database. We didn't check the procurement database. Directly. We relied on the representations in the filing. Harrison Webb. You relied on their representations? That's your due diligence? Trusting what they told you? Marcus Webb has not moved from his chair. Elena recognizes that expression. She has seen it in the mirror in the weeks after her parents died, when the enormity of what she had lost finally penetrated the protective numbness of grief. She does not feel sorry for him. James Whitfield, ending his call, voice like ice. I've instructed